What if I told you that the biggest and best change you can make to your art and photography is to pick up a book? Well, nearly a year ago, I was interviewed by a local media company who were following up on some work I had published. And at that time, I was asked, where do I get my ideas from and how do I go about making work and what do I suggest to help other people improve their work? And my answer, which turned out to be surprising to the journalist for some reason, was to read, and especially philosophy and history. And that is the basis for this video. 5 suggestions for books that, instead of just presenting dozens of photographs with little or no context, it actually delves into how photography was developed, who influenced them changes, and why they made the work that they did. Really, just as how this channel is not focused on simply copying techniques of others, these books reveal the intent of creators and how they utilise different techniques in order to achieve that. Obviously, the camera and technical aspects of making and editing photographs is key to developing your work, but getting bogged down in which lens is best often distracts from what it is that you're trying to communicate. Consider this the essential reading list for upcoming topics I'm going to be covering, and hopefully this selection will be as useful for you as it was for me. So, first up is, and in no particular order, Photography, a Cultural History by Merian. And this is simply the definitive history of photography. It was first published in 2002 and now has a 5th edition. And it has been and continues to be my number 1 reference for history. Covering the preconception of photography right up to the present day. There's hundreds of high quality reproductions and detailed contextual prose. This book's not a dry repetition of facts, but a story in itself. Some of the highlights include the use of the camera Lucida prior to the invention of permanently fixed printing, the use of high-speed photography and flash to document the movements of workers and enable efficiency improvements in manufacturing, and a subversion of convention which came with each new art movement. So if you've ever wondered what the difference between structuralism and postmodernism, pictorialism and all the other isms is, and how they came about and why they became popular and who was influential, this is the book for you. The only drawback to this book is basically in its extraordinary scope. It's an excellent entry into any topic, but it limits its ability to really delve into specific practitioners, genres and periods. There is focus pages where you can pick up this kind of stuff, but primarily I think of this book as a stepping off point where you can go to the reference section at the back and delve deeper into every single piece of information which was used to form this. I didn't think about where I was going to put these after I looked at them. So next on my list is one of those types of books, and it's Max Kozloff's 2007 The Theatre of the Face, Portrait Photography Since 1900. This is one of my all-time favourite books, mainly as portraiture is a subject which highly interests me, and where Warner Merian's work is all-encompassing, Kozloff concentrates on images of people, whether it is studio work, documentary, commercial portraiture, or even everyday snapshots. This really expands on the genre of portraiture and ties it back to the cultural and historical influence, and Kozloff achieves this with, once again, a large selection of really high quality reproductions, and instead of individual images, there's a focus on individual practitioners. Kozloff chooses those who are most representative of the time period, which is how the book is structured. You can see here how there is a focus on August Sander, comparing not only his images against each other, but against his contemporaries such as Mike Disfarmer and Jenny DeVasson. This is one of Kozloff's strengths. The book really follows his interests and not necessarily the road well worn. So there is an extensive inclusion of South American, Indian and South African work, and it really highlights the differences between cultures and, importantly, different uses of photography, both as a tool but also technically and theoretically. So my third book is a good follow-up, as it focuses on the conventions of photography. And that's David Bate's 2009 Photography, The Key Concepts. It's more a theoretical piece than previous mentioned work of Kozloff and Merian. The focus is not on dozens of images, but instead concentrating on what is the constituent elements of an image, what makes it a specific genre and its use, and also how that influences the interpretation and meaning of images. If you've seen my previous video on the portrait of Steve Jobs, my critique of that image is based on the principles that Bate talks about in this book. And I recommend it as it's quite an accessible book. It's a nice look at the development of photography, but more importantly, the development of its rules. It's more a series of short essays leading us to a much more comprehensive and insightful understanding of what photography is. It's written in a way which is academic enough, where it introduces new ideas, but it's not so impenetrable that it isn't useful. My next choice, however, is a bit harder going, and that is a fantastic follow-up to Bate's work. It is edited by Liz Wells and it is The Photography Reader. It's less a book on photography and more a collection of the most influential essays written about photography and visual media. And I recommend this as a follow-on, as most of the essays in this book are quite advanced, and those who know who many of the included writers are will tell you they're not always accessible to first-time readers. But if you're up for a challenge and can stomach rereading sections over again, you'll find some of these the most insightful writing put to page. And another great aspect of this book is it reproduces all of the original illustrations from the essays, which, due to many rights reasons, is actually quite rare to find in reproductions. It's really good at having a diverse selection of writers, so it brings many different viewpoints into the same place. It's a really great entry point to reading deeper into each of these writers and the theories that they talk about, the practitioners that they talk about as well. But it isn't for the faint of heart. And that brings us to my final, but not really final, but we'll pretend it's my final recommendation. John Berger's 1972 Ways of Seeing. So I've selected this book not necessarily for being the most important work made on photography, but rather because I found it to be one of those books which really challenged my perspective on how we interpret images. Berger's writing is really, really accessible, it's fun, engaging, and the selection of illustrations and the way that they're laid out works really well for demonstrating Berger's points. Despite, and that's for this copy I have, having really low quality reproductions, thankfully they're easily found online so you can look at what Berger's trying to highlight in them images. I think it's fair to say that Berger's intent was really to highlight how image making helps construct meaning and how meaning is often utilised to justify the hierarchies of class, especially in European societies. So as a working class northerner, this resonates with my experiences, but especially at the time of publishing, it wasn't a perspective necessarily welcomed by the art establishment. Now, I do have a bonus for you. No one can make a list of recommended books on photography without including Roland Barthe. So, Camera Lucida is perhaps the most well-known and widely read of Barthe's work, and I feel it's down to the fact that it's probably Barthe's most accessible, and that's saying something. So, rather than it being a traditional philosophical text or specific investigation into photography, it's more of a wistful exploration of Barthe's own experiences of life and death. It's famous for describing the photograph of his mother, which he's never seen, but it leads us to a story that connects us and Barthe together over this imaginary image, something that I'm sure we all have in our collection, one that other people necessarily wouldn't value, but we would never give up. Now, I feel that I need to address one major issue with this list, and that is diversity. So I've selected here 4 books out of 6, all written by white men, and they might be from different times and locations, but ultimately it's representative of the disparity between gender and, for want of a better term, race represented in photographic literature. So I want to encourage you now to seek out the work of Stuart Hall and Susan Sontag and Susan Bright, Charlotte Cottam, Val Williams, and many others who I've overlooked here. Each has influenced my work, and all have worked to try and elevate underrepresented artists, and it's fantastic reading and essential reading for those looking to expand their knowledge of photography. And if I was to do a list of the works that changed my perspective specifically, they will definitely be included. For now, I've linked all the books in the description. They're not affiliated, so shop around and get the best deal you can. I often compare Amazon and eBay and do a general web search before making a purchase, because you'll often find people who don't know the value of what they're selling, or people clearing out from leaving uni, and you can get a really good deal. And on top of that, you never know what you're going to get when you buy a used book. Today, when I opened up Bate's book, I found a used toothpick inside the pages that had been stuffed right down and for some reason popped out. You can also find a lot of these works referenced on research websites, student libraries, blogs, places like that, where you'll be able to get excerpts or sections of the books, which you can just pick and choose specific bits of information you want to get, and you can get them for free. Now, the reason I've done a video on books today is because I believe an investment in a dozen books is a hell of a lot cheaper and will result in a hell of a lot better images than the difference between an f4 and an f2.8 lens will ever make. So that's it. Hopefully it's been useful. Hopefully I've given you enough about them books to get you interested in them, but without giving away everything about them. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who subscribed recently, and all the feedback I've been getting on the videos that I've been making. It's really encouraged me to carry on going. If you would like to join the dozen or so people who've subscribed, you can do in the doobly-doo, which is normally around here. And you'll find all my socials and everything in the video description. Feel free to say hi, give me ideas for more videos, ask me questions. And until next time, thank you.